Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is, Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. And today we are going to discuss what to do if your farm was previously a car lot. Should compost operations just start a farm instead? And why it's hard to scale back a farm without losing money. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year will be brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil. If you're looking for compost or propagation mix, check out tilthsoil.com. Link will be in the show notes. I hope everyone is having a good week so far. It's only 2 days in, so in theory, if it's not going well, there's time to fix it. So that's nice. My week is off to a decent and normal start, I guess, where yesterday I decided to finally harvest the broom corn, not for brooms, but for seed. Broom corn should be harvested pretty green, but I just never got around to it this summer. And also I only had like 3 or 4 that were good. And I've heard this about broom corn, that a lot of the seed, just is super variable. So you only get a handful of good broom corn out of a stand. So I was like, maybe I'll save seed on the good broom corn and see if I can get a better stand next year. Anyway, I did that, and I figured I could get that job done in like a really short amount of time before I spent like half the day on it. But anyway, we're cruising along into October nicely, and I'm feeling good about it. But I gotta say, there is a lot of flooding in North America right now. I saw 4 stories of flooding in different areas this morning, from Alaska to California to Mexico and to New England area as well. Heavy rains in the fall can be brutal because there's just not quite the same level or number of thriving, thirsty plants in the fall that can absorb and utilize that water. When we got like 4.5 inches of rain last week after 2 months of drought, our farm suddenly turned to quicksand, or more like quick clay, I guess, in a way that it doesn't really do that in, the summer and spring when we get heavy rains. So anyway, heavy fall rain can be really hard to deal with on a farm. So sending our love to everyone dealing with that this week. Unrelated or possibly related, if you want to send us how your farm is going in a flood, please keep sending in your 20-second farm videos to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. I, in fact, loved the Earthway cedar one yesterday, where they opened it up and found like a little spider nest inside of the Earthway. Jumping spiders love Earthway cedars, and we always run a string down the chute before seeding because all the seeds will just build up on top of that nest. I'm not convinced the Earthway isn't built by a jumping spider, to be honest. Just saying. All right, so today I thought we could discuss a potential loophole in the compost facility world that may have a somewhat beautiful symbiosis to it in regards to other farms, depending on your local laws, of course. To back up, yesterday I talked about some of my takeaways from the Kentucky Composting Conference, but I wanted to share one that I thought might affect both farmers and composters in a positive way, but you will have to do your own research on your own composting laws in your area, because waste management laws, which is what composting is considered, can be different not only by state but by municipality. Anyway, the big takeaway that I had was that composting operations could maybe just start farms. What I mean is that there is a certain amount of composting that is allowed to happen on any old farm, right, without regulation. Like you, farmer, are allowed to compost some amount of material that you produce, and in some cases, materials brought in from other places. Carbon sources, for instance, are widely considered okay to bring onto a farm. Wood chips, rotten hay, that sort of stuff. In some situations, bringing nitrogenous materials like food waste or manure will also be okay, as long as it doesn't then leave the farm or it doesn't become like a stinky nightmare. Anyway, the idea being you're bringing in fertility and you're allowed to do that as a farmer. But if it can't leave the farm, you might ask, how could I turn that into a composting operation? Well, good question. What if it didn't need to leave the farm? So hear me out. And obviously, I just have to reiterate this like 1,000 times. Don't just start an operation like this without really investigating your local laws thoroughly. But step 1 is to find a farmer who wants to start a farm. You both start the farm together and immediately start generating revenue through tipping fees. These are the fees that the arborists and the like pay places to dump wood chips, or brewers pay for dumping like spent brewery grains or whatever. If you can, you expand to taking in money from customers who will pay you to pick up their food scraps from their home. So unlike a normal farm that takes months to get started, especially on the revenue front, in this scenario, you almost immediately have revenue. Then you start a composting section of the farm, like a whole section of the farm that's dedicated specifically to composting. And then you start a vegetable side of the farm or whatever else that you want to grow. The compost, depending on what the local laws say, is then either used exclusively on that farm, or potentially it could be donated, but It's used exclusively on the farm, but the revenue is not from the compost itself, but from those tipping fees. And it just goes directly over to the farmer whose land it shares. But maybe the compost could be sold, and not to be highly redundant here, but again, that will depend on your laws. Or possibly it could be donated, maybe exclusively to quote unquote members of the farm who pay a certain yearly fee. Obviously, not just for the market side of things, but all the rules for, runoff and smell, etc., would have to be heeded. But this could be a way for, starting both a farm and a composting business to divert food scraps from the landfills in your area while also having abundant compost access as a farm. I got to be honest, if we had thought of this 17 years ago when we were looking at starting a farm, we might have followed this model and created something similar instead of creating a farm that has to pay for the compost that we need. Not only could the farmer in this scenario not have to pay for compost, if the two businesses were combined, the compost would make money for the farmers in this case. Imagine abundant compost that pays you to be made. Moreover, if it is a situation locally where you are permitted to sell the compost, the sky becomes the limit here. Potting mixes, mulching compost, nutritional compost, raised bed mixes, all the things. Anyway, wannabe composters should maybe just start farms. That's kind of all I'm saying. In fact, there are examples of this out there, like Herbivore Farm out in Missouri, who might act as a model for what we're talking about. And we did a video with them that touched on this subject, and also an interview with them on the podcast. I will try and link those in the show notes. Otherwise, thoughts, concerns, ideas it sparks, let me know, and we will tackle those on Friday. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, starting a garden where once was a car lot, we'll see. BRB.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Rachel Kirk, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I am in the process of purchasing my first home, yay, with a beautiful 3/4 acre lot that I can't wait to start growing in. However, the seller has some vehicles parked around the perimeters of the property. He'll be moving them prior to closing, but should I be concerned about planting in or around those areas? Are there any specific precautions I should take to remedy those areas, or even specific type of soil test to ensure it's safe? Maybe I'm overthinking all of this, but I would appreciate any help and advice," end quote. All right, I love this. This is a very interesting question, Rachel. Thank you, and thank you for the support. So for starters, I guess I would be curious to know if the previous landowner was like working on those cars in those spots, or just kind of keeping them there. If they were regularly working on cars in those areas, you could potentially have oil and antifreeze and all sorts of stuff that leaked out or has been poured around that area. Yes, you can get the soil tested for contaminants. Your county extension office should be able to help, at least guide you in the right direction on where to send those. But by and large, I'm not concerned with small amounts of, those oils. But obviously, if they were pouring out old materials in an area, which unfortunately is a thing on some farms, they just literally have a spot where they pour oil on the ground, then you may have an issue that could use some amount of remediation, perhaps using wood chips to grow mushrooms, or maybe just cover crops to draw the chemicals out, dispose of the material, appropriately, all before using that area again for crops. In sort of researching this question, I was a little bit surprised at how bad oils can be to soil. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I did come across this study on earthworms and motor oil contaminated soils, the intro of which I'm going to quote here, quote, "1 liter of used motor oil can pollute up to 3,784 square meters of soil, making it non-productive for farming or plant growth for up to 100 years. Petroleum hydrocarbon, the main components of the used oils, spread horizontally in the groundwater surface and partition into water, soil pore, airspace, and to the surfaces of soil particles. The entry of used oil will alter some of the soil properties, resulting in poor aeration, immobilization of nutrients, and lowering of pH, which are largely responsible for change in fertility of soil. These alterations may lead to mass mortality of animals living in the topmost layers of soil. ultimately disrupting biological equilibrium of soil. Thus, soil becomes less productive when exposed to used motor oil. Used oils are, therefore, considered as one of the most hazardous mainstream categories of environmental pollutants, posing a major threat to the environment and public health, end quote. So that's fun. That's not great, especially in that volume. Again, I think having it tested is not the worst idea, but also on top of any potential chemical or oil residue, you will have to consider compaction. Cars are heavy, sure, but they are also shady, meaning that for the duration of the time that they've been parked there, nothing has been growing underneath the soil, which generally, roots decompact the soil. So if there's nothing there, it's probably getting even more compacted than if something was growing there. So you will also have to have a plan for addressing, any compaction and lack of organic matter in the area. Now, I do feel confident that you can get the area up and running as long as contamination levels are low or of course, preferably non-existent. Just start with the test and expect to do some decompaction, possibly some soil remediation before really diving into the gardening side. Great question, and great questions is always flowing in right now, Patreon members. Please keep those fun, specific, situational questions coming. Also, keep questions coming, general themes. I love covering stuff that is farm adjacent, but maybe not specifically like dense farming stuff. So feel free to put those in as well. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, lessons in farm scale, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so as I've said several times already, we pulled back quite a bit on the farming this year so that I could start the show that you're watching now or listening to, and frankly, figure out how much we could actually do with this particular added labor. And honestly, I figured out that we could probably do a fair bit more than we did this year. So in that way, we're looking to expand our operation up just a little bit next year. The challenge, though, is scale. Basically, one of the big takeaways was that it didn't cost us a whole lot less to scale back to 1/4 of an acre or whatever we grew this year than it did to just grow the entire acre. I mean, the difference was, just a couple $1,000s in material like compost and potting soil and seeds, but maybe not even that much. Like, I've broken this down before, depending on how you divide your expenses up. A farm cost, and this is entirely arbitrary and depending on your local taxes and what you all need to insure, $10,000 or so per year just to own it, just to own a farm. Yes, just for it to sit there. Our insurance, especially with tunnels, a house, and an important, outbuilding that we use, is around $6,000 a year, plus estate taxes, plus some general utilities that are just required for it to, exist. Then add in, seeds, more water, more electricity, compost, fertility, tools, repairs, delivery vehicles, fuel, all the stuff. And it's basically $15,000 to $20,000 per year to just run a farm, especially if you're doing a farmer's market. That's another, $1,200 or more. So that is the revenue that you need to make before you have made any money, before you can pay even yourself. But the nice thing is that number doesn't change a ton beyond that. Like, seeds are not crazy expensive, for instance. So buying a few more of those is not a big deal. Depending on what you're growing, the difference between an acre and a 1/4 acre, is maybe $500 or $1,000 in seeds or whatever. Fertility is a little bit more expensive, but again, you can get creative with it, and it will depend on what you're growing. Cover crops, for instance, aren't costly at all. And if you're, making some of your own compost and then just buying the rest in bulk, it's not crazy either to just add a little bit more and get a slightly bigger load. Although for sure, you should start small and figure out what you can afford when you're, just beginning. You should also figure out as fast as you can what your baseline expenses are, because there will be a point at which if you make below X dollars in a season, you are just spending money to farm. And for some, that will be fine. I mean, I suppose, but just as a hobby. But as a business model, it is perhaps less than ideal to make less than you spend. Anyway, I guess all that to say that we ran into this reality this year where we pulled back on the farm only to spend a little less than we had in previous years to just have the farm. Now, we knew that going in, but I frankly thought I could save a little bit more money than we did. But the truth is that, one, farming is expensive. So if you do not have a good profit plan, you will lose money. And two, there are a lot of fixed costs that come with land ownership that are hard to whittle down. They don't love it when you do that with estate taxes. We could probably find slightly cheaper insurance, and that's in my plans for the winter, but can't do much about those taxes. Or I suppose one could just heed the idea from the first segment, and then the tipping fees cover the baseline expenses, and you're good to go. And you even got your fertility, so that's all nice. Anyway, what say you all about this? Have you run into this reality yourselves? It's not get big or get out exactly, but it is certainly be productive or don't bother, or maybe be productive or expect to be spending money to just own a farm. Anyway, I think I'll end it on that and let you all carry on the convo in the convo section. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that, maybe get an end of the year tax break if you need one, in the comments section. Please make sure to like and or subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Tell her we said hi. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, and remember to pull up the names, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Christy Pollock and Aaron Hilliard. Hilliard or Hillard? It's Aaron. All right, so shouts to these new members, and as a thank you, we will continue our story. And you will remember that somewhat devastatingly, we learned that our swing dancer, Raj, was in a car accident one day and woke up in a hospital to find both of his legs had to be amputated. And this, of course, was devastating news. And, you know, it's hard to take this sort of stuff at first. Obviously, it's like something you could never imagine. Raj had spent his entire life dancing. What was the next 40 plus years going to be like without legs? The doctors and nurses were great with Raj, and they spent a lot of time discussing advancements in prosthetics and working on his mental health and, you know, different options he could try. And they really cared about Raj, and he felt great about that. However, as he was finally leaving the hospital, one young doctor slipped him a card and said, give this number a call. They may have something that could help you out. And Raj was like, you know, sorry, I don't really do drugs, thank you, but like, you know, that's not really my thing. And the young doctor laughed and he said, this is not drugs, friends. This is a group that grows legs. And that is for tomorrow on Growing a Dance. The title's way better than that, I promise. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.